Hi.
Oh no, are you kidding?
It's just
Who invited her?
that you're going to get to be a Formula One driver just because you're a sport driver or just because you want to. But a lot of people want to. He's probably shitting himself.
I happen to think that Season 6 of Drive to Survive might actually be the best yet. But does that make it the best it could or should have been? Not even close. Let me talk about why and what I think Netflix should do differently in 2024. Oh, and spoiler alert. Let's go! I'll start by breaking down the season episode by episode, story by story. I'll rate and rank the episodes, talk about what I liked and disliked about each one, and then I'll sum up my thoughts on the season as a whole and the future of Drive to Survive. So, episode 1, Money Talks.
Looks great. Imagine next year now.
Weirdo.
I mean, it's funny that
Oi, Netflix, you really tested me by starting out with Strolls. This episode's main story is of Lance Stroll overcoming his pre-season biking injury to race in Bahrain, as well as the overall step forward Aston Martin made from 2022 to the start of 2023. It's good for the first episode since they also dedicate a lot of time to checking in with the other teams and setting the scene of the season starting, so we don't have to suffer through too much of the Stroll action. This episode is well and truly mid. The story of Stroll overcoming his injury isn't really strong enough to carry the episode, especially due to his lack of charisma, and the rest of the sort of montage-like coverage of the situations at the start of the season for the rest of the teams is also disjointed and scattershot. There are many non-scenes here.
Uh-oh.
just trying to buy a horse
Christian.
in the auction at Cheltenham.
While it's nice to see random interactions between drivers on different teams, Toto and Fred, Gunther fishing, Christian Horner try to buy a horse, none of those things really contributed to a story. If you've been keeping up with the memes, you also know that Danica Patrick is here, really picking up the slack from Will Buxton on delivering painfully obvious commentary. Stay tuned for a rant about her later. I'll give this one a 4 out of 10. On to episode 2, Fall from Grace.
Apart from me, this man is the fastest person in the universe.
I think Max Verstappen might be a bit quicker than you, Phil.
Well,
Now this episode has a story and some spice to it. In contrast to the first episode, this one's very focused on Daniel Ricciardo's sideline role at the start of the season, Nick De Vries' downward spiral, and Ricciardo's ascension to the AlphaTauri seat following the Silverstone test. The focus of this episode shows off some of the best storytelling in the series and showcases Drive to Survive at its very best. For regular F1 fans, we get to see the juicy behind-the-scenes footage of how Danny replacing Nick actually went down, things that we read or heard about but never saw. The test itself, the spur-of-the-moment meeting between Horner, Bayer, and Ricciardo's manager Blake right after he sets the lap where they make the call.
You and your cohort available. Let's do a cup of tea. Okay, so that lap you just did.
This is good.
We'll just put it next to Max on the grid. He's looks like he's the Daniel that we recognise rather than one I've seen the last couple of years. We'd like to see him in the car for the next race.
That's good. That's the kind of stuff that Drive to Survive should be about.
We also get to know Nick De Vries in a way that at least I didn't during the regular season. Now I know he's a neatest elitist who gravely underestimated Yuki's talent and overestimated his own.
Yuki is a very quick driver, but I am a little bit more experienced, more mature, and more complete.
He said that? Alright.
Right.
Cool. And now I'm like, I'm home free. I'm off the hook. I don't have to struggle to watch this. Cool. I don't like him.
And paid the price for it. This one's a straight up 10 out of 10 Drive to Survive episode. Right, episode 3 now, Under Pressure.
And how much gel he's got in his hair. It's like so freaking stiff. That's slicked back. That's slicked back.
This is a simple team episode following McLaren's lackluster start to the season into their dramatic return to form at Silverstone. While this was a compelling narrative to watch this season, this episode falls a bit flat due to the lack of meaningful behind-the-scenes footage to tell that story. Zach Brown's scenes with the McLaren executive chairman feel a bit too staged. There's a return to the first episode of the season's throwaway scenes with some interesting moments like Lando and George flying on the McLaren jet together.
Really nice. Yeah, mate, it's freaking mint.
but that aren't really related to the story. There's a lot of being a team principal at an underperforming team is a lot of pressure. Drivers always keep their options open to move. People demand results, but it really drags on without much interesting or new said. Seeing meetings with Andrea Stella discussing the process of designing the upgrade package was interesting, but it was glossed over. It was one of the few meetings that didn't feel hammed up for the camera, and it's something F1 fans don't get to see all that much of. The story of the pressure on the engineering team and Andrea Stella might have actually been more interesting, because they have a more direct impact on the results coming than Zach does. This episode is a lot of Zach fielding the pressure and questions, golfing with Lando, commentators going on and on about how hard it is being Zach right now, and then Zach celebrating the return to form. Better than the first episode, but only a 5 out of 10. Episode 4, The Last Chapter.
Play the clip.
Once again, Paul stands for the Bravo, set my balls ready.
An ominous title, and I wonder if it was changed after the Gunther news. This episode follows Haas and Williams' rivalry, culminating in Williams surging ahead in Canada. There's a lot to like here. Gunther is one of the best DTS characters for a reason. That's absolutely evident here with every hygiene. But this episode introduces new Williams team principal, James Vowles.
Morning.
This is the Williams building?
Morning.
Is anyone home?
Morning. Morning. Morning.
How many mornings can one guy say?
I think the show does a really good job of playing the two off each other, as James is such a good foil for Gunther. Claire Williams is also able to really shine from the commentary side in this one, given her experience as team principal of Williams allows her to speak to the stress of leading a backmarker team. It's not a perfect episode. I thought the scenes with Gunther's audiobook recording and book signing didn't add that much, and weirdly, although we watched the Canadian Grand Prix and there's a reference to Haas having a good quali, it's not a story beat at all that Hulkenberg stuck the thing second on the grid. This is a really good episode though. Some really memorable moments, well structured, and a complete story. It's a 9 out of 10. Episode 5. Civil War.
The positive side is over, finally.
The first of 2 Alpine episodes, but did there need to be 2? I don't think so. Here we're given some backstory about the infamous Ocon-Gasly relationship, but for scenes that drag on for as long as they do, I feel like we don't learn enough about the actual crux of why they don't like each other. There's the notion that it started after one race when Pierre overtook Ocon on the last corner but then got disqualified, but we don't see what for. It's also vague that it really wasn't worth going into the tension between them unless at some point last year it was resolved spectacularly, but it wasn't. Later on in the season we get a throwaway update from Pierre that their dynamic is the best it's been for a decade, but there's really nothing more to it. The other narrative being set up is Otmar's downfall and Alpine CEO Laurent Rossi's discontent with him. We do see some compelling examples of him looking a bit clueless and bumbling in managing the team.
The plan today is to take Pierre and Esteban back to their old days of karting. We want to show the world that they can work together and put the past behind them.
But another incomplete thread. This episode is lacking a complete story and focus. I think it should have been combined with the second Alpine episode. There were many missed stories of 2023 that could have used an episode, so seems like a waste to have 2 Alpine ones. 4 out of 10. Episode 6, A Leap of Faith.
We mic you up. We're gonna get on with it.
Way too much to do, Dalian.
No,
Since I was 13.
This is definitely the worst aged of the new episodes, with Lewis subsequently signing for Ferrari in the off-season. This one's mostly a story about Toto and Lewis struggling with the Mercedes car underperforming, and Lewis exploring his options with his Mercedes contract up. Ultimately, the conclusion of the episode is that he re-signs with Mercedes for 2 years, and Lewis says,
There just never feels like a time where I'm not going to be a Mercedes driver.
just beautiful. Although the episode is rendered more interesting due to what's happened since, it's only an okay one. There's some good behind the scenes footage, like Lewis discussing the Mercedes car's shortcomings in a team debrief and his discussion with Toto, but there's also a lot of fluff in here, like Toto and Susie taking their son karting, for example, which ultimately is just a visual backdrop for all the commentary and exposition about Toto seeking more performance. Other than being kinda cute and a loose metaphor for Mercedes needing to do work on their car to move up, it's the kind of fluff Drive to Survive could do with less of, to be replaced by more story-relevant and spontaneous feeling footage. Still, at least this episode has a through line and tells a complete story. 7 out of 10. Episode 7. C'est la vie.
Now, what if I can? Very strange.
The second Alpine episode, and it's far better than the first, but even better if you imagine what it could have been for them to be combined. In this one, we see a culmination of Otmar's struggle, a string of terrible races leading to him being dramatically fired while in the paddock in Belgium, and then Bruno Famine taking over as team principal and seemingly turning the team's dynamic around, which leads to a well-executed race and podium at Zandvoort. While the start drags on, especially since Alpine's lack of performance is the focus only 2 episodes prior. The rest of this episode is Drive to Survive at its best. We see genuine, spontaneous behind-the-scenes drama.
Okay. This was very sudden, so I don't have a plan B, so to speak.
There's an awesome scene here too, with Bruno Famine and some other Alpine people meeting Christian Horner in a hallway, and Christian rolling his eyes at the situation.
How are you? Oh, hey, fine. Very good. So the new boss, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. It's a punchy decision.
I'm not completely sold on the episode's conclusion that Bruno has turned around the morale of the team. I think that had more to do with the result. Anyway, this episode bangs 8 out of 10. Should still have been combined with the last Alpine episode. Episode 8. Forza Ferrari.
Forza Ferrari.
Molto bene, sì, perfetto.
Silly guy.
Forza Ferrari. Forza Ferrari.
Ah, good old Ferrari. This one's pretty different. We get to hear from a select group of Italian Ferrari fans discussing the team in everyday life. First, they're concerned about Fred's appointment, so we get to see a bit of his backstory and why he's a surprising pick for Ferrari. Then we see Monza and Carlos's pole, where the team's riding on a high, and then to the race, where they're overtaken by Verstappen and Leclerc and Sainz have their intense battle, which the Ferrari fans are disturbed by. We then see Fred deal with it, have a chat with them and get them to calm down, and we go to Singapore, where Sainz pulls off the win.
We can put some pressure on Red Bull if we were to go.
This one's a solid episode. The voice of the Italian fans was interesting and different, although I wonder how they picked these people to follow, and the episode has a good arc to it. I feel like they missed out on some of the magic of Carlos's Singapore win, how he kept Lando in DRS to hold off the Mercedes, but I get that it didn't fit with the main story they were telling. It would have been interesting to squeeze some Lando Carlos backstory in there and make it a bit more of a Carlos episode, but Fred is a new team principal at Ferrari, so it makes sense to make him the focus. A solid 8 out of 10 episode. Episode 9, Three's a Crowd.
The honey badger's back. Need to remind these cats. Ready to go. Let's fucking go.
I mean, it's Daniel Ricciardo. Say less. This banging episode follows Daniel Ricciardo's return to AlphaTauri, his injury, Liam Lawson's sensational performance, the team then ultimately choosing Daniel and Yuki for the next year, and Daniel's epic Mexico P7. Obviously, fans already know the story from following the season, but it's nicely augmented here with some great footage. Liam Lawson and his family are great and bring a lot of heart to the episode. I would have maybe wanted some more Yuki, but that's about it. This is a near perfect episode of the show in its current format.
They now have 3 drivers for 2 seats. They have Daniel, they have Yuki, and Liam Lawson has very much entered the chat.
Entered the chat. 9 out of 10. Episode 10, Red or Black.
Oh, Las Vegas, baby.
That was
so much put into this.
Of course, they weren't going to let this season go by and not cover Vegas. This episode covers the end of the season, but mostly Vegas. And the very loose story focuses the battle for P2 and P3 in the Constructors. We spend a long time in this episode in the same kind of scattershot way DTS can get sometimes, jumping around different perspectives on the Vegas race and setup. We do actually get to see Sainz hit the drain cover and Ferrari penalized, which I was so surprised about because I thought they wouldn't want to show that and make F1 look bad. But they also show the press conference where Fred was very upset about the situation. The rest of the Vegas race goes by, we all saw it, great race. Then we hit Abu Dhabi. They handle a lot of loose ends in this episode, tying up how everyone finishes off the season, which makes the episode feel quite busy and unfocused, but I mean, what are they gonna do? Other than some scattered funny moments,
I send you one letter.
It's like freaking.
there aren't any really impactful unseen moments in this episode compared to the last few. The fights between Mercedes and Ferrari and Aston and McLaren for P2 and P3 in the Constructors respectively were strong stories of the end of the season. Overall, it's an okay finish. 7 out of 10. My final ranking of the season 6 episodes is as follows. Episode 1, Money Talks, and Episode 5, Civil War, A Joint Last. Then it's Episode 3, Under Pressure. Then Episode 6, Leap of Faith, and Episode 10, Red or Black. Then Episode 7, C'est la vie, and Episode 8, Forza Ferrari. Then Episode 4, The Last Chapter, and Episode 9, Three's a Crowd. Finally, Episode 2, Fall from Grace. It's nearly a perfect episode. The average score for this season is a 7.1 out of 10, which I feel like is pretty decent. This was a very good season of a show that I think is well past its prime. I've touched on it in my previous video, check it out here, but Drive to Survive could do with a makeover. Here are my overall problems. Too many set scenes, i.e. when they follow a person to do something outside of F1.
Like you have pity with me.
Scripted.
These scenes feel unnatural and set up and are usually just an excuse to have 2 or more people have an unnatural conversation with each other. Like, these people have real conversations in the heat of the moment while they're working, not when Netflix says, let's go do a photo shoot or go to the golf course or we'll come on your private jet or when you take your kid to the go-kart track. My next big problem, and I think as fans have said every season, we can way cut back on the fake commentary and radio messages.
It's all about your best individual actor informs the grid on Sunday.
Most of the time, they're completely unnecessary, and the rest of the time, when you need a little exposition, I thought that's what Will Buxton was for. There's no reason he can't come in on voiceover and set the scene for a race sequence. I think a dedicated main host or narrator of the show, similar to what Keanu Reeves was doing in the Braun series, is a better way to go. Will Buxton could be that guy, but he's plenty busy during the regular season. Next, stop dumbing the sport down.
You don't convert pole into the win. It is biggest fact.
Quite a lot of missing context here.
The talking heads are talking down to the audience. 6 seasons in, even though it's serving as a gateway drug to F1, the majority of the audience at this point are not first-time viewers, and first-time viewers will probably go back to the start if they're hooked. For me at least, when something I don't quite understand comes up, it's more likely to draw me in than cause me to tune out. If you want people to keep coming back to Drive to Survive, they have to feel a progression season to season in how much they know about F1. If I purely watched Drive to Survive, I would probably have lost interest by now, feeling like the show has nothing new to offer me. Next, Danica Patrick is an awful addition.
The person with the most amount of pressure
She's
on
just
them
such a
is going to be
handbrake.
Toto. We can't promise that, we're gonna win the championship again. Can't promise we're gonna win races. The best thing that Toto can guarantee Lewis is that he's gonna listen to him.
Not only is her commentary stale, uninformative, and stiff, she's just the worst. If you don't know, look her up. She's hanging out with the likes of Tucker Carlson and the worst of the American far right. For a sport that likes to say it's apolitical, it's stupid to start aligning with someone who, by her own admission, is wanting to speak out more about her politics. If the goal is more representation of women in motorsports, which I absolutely think is a worthy cause for Drive to Survive, they should look to people like Bernie Collins, Laura Winter, Naomi Schiff, or add more Susie Wolf. Why not spotlight some of the women at the F1 teams too, like Hannah Schmidt at Red Bull? I mean, anyone but Danica Patrick, really. My biggest issue though, despite what we're being told about increased access, it feels like Netflix is often shut out of the rooms where most of the important conversations are had.
Alright, let's see how he's gonna fix it.
Bonjour.
Oh, Netflix, get yourself in the fucking room.
So many times we're watching a door, or there's no mic and we're watching through a window. If F1 wants a great show, they should force teams to allow DTS to get more of the interesting, normally unseen moments. Maybe get more aggressive with covering team buildings with hidden cameras and mics. The bulk of each episode this season felt very safe on each of the teams and key figures. Similarly, there are so many interesting people in the F1 circus we aren't seeing. We get why race control was not good to broadcast mid-race, but what about an episode on them? The FIA, FOM people. Like, yes, it's getting further away from the sport of it all, but I'm sure there's some spicy drama to be had by casting a wider net, even just within the teams. Lastly, where was my boy Oscar Piastri's Qatar sprint win? Huh? That's it. If you enjoyed this, please like, subscribe, and leave me a comment so we can chat. Next time, well, it's the Bahrain Grand Prix. See you then. Bye.